learning and studying renew your neurons. The brain is very plastic. So if you, again, enter a class and put yourself, to the test of memorizing things, in addition of becoming younger, because you will be probably meeting people who are younger than you, you also renew your brain.
Hello and welcome to the Future of Universities podcast series. My name is Arno Meerman, CEO of UIIN and your host for today. Today's episode is the second and last part of our conversation with Santiago Iñiguez, President of UIIN University, and Todd Davey, Associate Partner at UIIN. Building on the previous discussion, also available on our Spotify channel, we continue to delve into the importance of lifelong learning and what benefits the personalisation of education will bring to the current and future generations. We hope you will enjoy the conversation and insights from Santiago and Todd.
One of the things that we use as a good practice example when we are discussing how universities are moving into a future orientation is the WOW room at UIIN Business School. Now, the video room that you have. I wondered if you could just explain that to everybody about how that works and what that is. We can post some links in the chat so that people can actually have a look at that. But maybe if you could just describe it. Perhaps, actually, before you do that, could you just explain what you mean by synchronous and asynchronous? Because there might be a few people who weren't exactly sure what you meant by that. If you could start with that and then explain the WOW room, that'd be fantastic.
Thanks very much, and thanks for the questions. And sometimes we take things for granted, no? And we talk the specialist language. By synchronous, I mean learning experiences happening at the same time. By asynchronous, we refer to those methods that can take time, that can take place, over time, not necessarily at the same time. For example, a forum. A forum may take place, during an entire week. So participants can actually enter and discuss at their own convenience, as the professor would do. And this means that probably the momentum of learning keeps longer, which is a good thing because sometimes classes happen very quickly. Whereas, an asynchronous form of learning like a forum or similar formats can actually allow participants to interact, at their own ease, and concepts and ideas get more fixed, no? And you have, of course, time for asking questions, clarifications. There's more engagement among participants. Of course, in order to make these fora, for example, become more enjoyable and more interactive, you always need, a good moderator, and it has to be the professor. You cannot just, assign a tutor or a peer, no? Because in order to make the learning experience, run by someone who's the expert, then you need to appoint, the professor. So this is what I mean by synchronous and asynchronous, no? A classroom-based session would be synchronous, forum would be asynchronous. And then going to your question about the WOW room. The WOW room was launched now, it has, I guess, at least 5 years, 5 or more years. This was the concept, resulted from our experience in interacting via different platforms on streaming. And what we realized is that we could replicate the form of a class in order to enhance the experience, both for participants as well as for the professor. So we created a virtual room, an auditorium, which has screens, one for each student or participant, and the professor and the rest of the presenters were standing in the middle of the room, looking at the screens and following the discussion and orchestrating the whole session. It was not just, an amphitheater with all the faces of the guys, but it includes a number of apps that allows the professor and the rest of the participants to follow very important things that I guess are now becoming part of the learning analytics part of the process. For example, face recognition. You know that professors are very keen on following whether their audiences understand what they explain, what they say.
And you can read the room, if you like, by looking at the faces. Yeah.
So there are apps currently, for anticipating or for foreseeing, whether your students are actually following the explanation or they are just, or they are bored. Of course, these may add, more stress to the professor, because it may become a sort of vicious circle. Sometimes if you realize that your students are bored, then you become more stressed. But anyway, this gathers lots of information for the professor in order to enhance some part of the explanation of the class, or in order to repeat things that may not be clear. Just to use some app. Of course, the format of the WOW Room also provides the best scene in order to, for example, visit virtually places that participants are not able to visit at that time. They also allow for interaction between participants in presence and participants online. So it's difficult, but the good thing about our WOW Room was that it was not, a studio production. The good thing about our solution was that it could actually be run by the professor. So you didn't need actually a whole production team behind the scenes, which is very costly and would make, the whole process undoable for most institutions. This only required, a supporting services team for the entire WOW rooms that were in operation, with the professor managing their own, class. So it was very convenient and very economic for institutions. Of course, to be very honest, what we now realize is that after the pandemic, undergraduate students in particular, the youngsters, are very keen on returning to face-to-face experience. So on the other hand, executives have discovered, the virtues of online learning. So it has happened, the reverse thing. Now executives and companies hire more online and blended education, whereas youngsters are very keen to socialize and come in presence, to the campus.
Maybe that's a good time to pick up just one of the focuses that I wanted to bring to the discussion today was around lifelong learning, and the notion of never actually leaving the university environment, because you'll spend the rest of your life either returning or revisiting concepts, as you said, reinventing yourself, upskilling yourself, reskilling, all those concepts. So I just wanted to explore a little bit about your opinion of what is the role of universities in this lifelong learning activity?
I think it's key, and it should become even more important in the future, because universities have been present in this segment mostly through their extension units. The idea was, to use the excellent part of the faculty to teach, parts of the population that didn't have access to regular degrees. No, but now we need to think about this increasing size of the population, which is the adult population. This is happening for sure in Europe, but also in some other Asian countries, China, Japan, for sure. Given life expectancy and given the very expectable, expansion of the time of retirement, what we all need is probably to come back to universities maybe 3 or 4 times during our professional careers, because the content of jobs will change. The environment will certainly change. And you cannot live up with the same degree that you earned 40 years ago and exert, the same profession. It's like accountants or doctors. They need to go back, and refresh their knowledge. Doctors today, practice, do a practice that is very different to the one that they learned at school. The same applies to accountants. They need to revalidate their knowledge in accountancy every 5 years. So the same is applicable to any other profession, even to areas like the humanities, where some people may think, that, Cicero is eternal. Well, there's many different readings about Cicero. So you need to learn, what has been published about the classics, recently. So I very much encourage, adults to think about lifelong learning, but not just in order to update their knowledge or reskilling or upskilling, but also for two other reasons. The first one is because you can reinvent yourself, as you were suggesting, and you can change careers. You can transform yourself in the ideal person you dreamt in your early years, but you couldn't actually achieve. And second, because learning and studying actually renew your neurons. And this is actually shown by recent discoveries in neurobiology. I mean, the fact is that the brain is very plastic. So if you, again, enter a class and put yourself, to the test of memorizing things and using, those intellectual capabilities, then in addition of becoming younger, because you will be probably meeting people who are younger than you, and you will see what are their concerns, and you will understand society much better. You also renew your brain, which is vital, in order to live. It's something similar to what we do when we go to the fitness center. I mean, we want to keep fitted and agile. Well, we need to do something similar with our brains.
I'm going to take a quote from you on that one, which is learning and studying renews your neurons. I think it's a quite a unique perspective that you've brought there. I think that's fantastic. We have a question from Marco Savage. When mentioning personalisation, do you consider skills frameworks? If you do, we'll come into the second question.
Yes, we consider skills, preferences. Imagine, for example, that people can, that they are, fans of soccer, let's say. And you want to explain maths, the basic of maths. I mean, this is a very typical example, no? So if you actually use examples and references from soccer, you'll probably get much better results than using, I wonder whether you studied with the traditional problems that I still recall, if a train leaves CTA, at that time, what time does it arrive at CTV? Which, I mean, many people didn't actually take trains, no, or were not that familiarized. So the question about personalizing the education has to do with making it more enjoyable, more familiar, and people learn better and faster when they deal with familiar, environments, with things that they already know. And of course, this also applies to skills. Allow me to put you an example. You can actually learn how to become more inclusive and how to respect diversity by using the metaverse and assigning one of the students, the opposite sex that person has, or even, assume, let's say, a transgender avatar and deal, with the problems that a transgender may face, in a company, and see how that person, afterwards shares, the feedback of the experience. So these sorts of exercises can actually make the education much more personalized. Of course, not to talk about learning analytics. What we try is to collect data about the performance of our students over time. So if you have a personalized, sorts of information of database on the individual, how they have performed on different areas and key, KPIs, in order to see the evolution over time, then the education can become, much more personalized, and you can provide feedback and even mentorship to that person in order to strengthen those areas where there might be weaknesses.
Okay, I think you also just wanted a second point, which was around how do you bring that into the context of a formal learning recognition?
I guess, this has to do, you mean recognition, I guess, by the student. Oh, I see. In the end, this is something quite interesting, no? I guess we still need some years, in order to be so personalized, because unfortunately, the way degrees are structured and provided today are very standardized. So I wish, we reach at some stage the time when degrees and certificates can be so personalized that they capture, the very essence of each of the students. Unfortunately, now what universities can provide, is a degree or a certificate that assesses and that tells, the rest of the world that you are good at something. But in time, I'm sure that we will see, more personalized, more adaptive sorts of degrees and certificates for sure. And we will discover many new skills.
I think that question therefore is answered. We've got another question from Sebastian Matos Palial. The question is, do you think that the massive implementation of micro-credentials in universities would lead then to excessive marketization of higher education? So essentially the effect of micro-credentials on the institution.
I guess macro-credentials and this is actually a fact, no? If you look at, let's say, LinkedIn, most of the members highlight in their bios. At first, the first line are the micro-credentials and the certificates that they have obtained, particularly if they come from leading universities, no? For two reasons. First, because they are more updated. So it shows, that the member is updating their education. No? I mean, they are very much concerned about lifelong learning. And the second reason is because in many of the cases, of course, those certificates and micro-credentials come from leading institutions. So users themselves, enhance very much this. And at some stage, I have talked to colleagues at LinkedIn because I'm very active on LinkedIn, no? And I was lucky to be selected as an influencer, but I've told LinkedIn that we should probably think about how to assess the validity of certificates and micro-credentials, because there's no agency actually that assesses, the validity of those. Whereas if you say you hold a degree from some university, you can always check with the registers, whether that's true or not. So going to your question, I guess, and I've always defended this, massive education has a social mission. And I very much, defend all sorts of education in whatever form, either they are massive or personalized, or because education is good. Having said this, many of the promises of massive education have not been fulfilled. Years ago, the MOOCs, the massive online open courses, the dream was to reach out to those countries and societies that couldn't have access to higher education. The fact is that if you look at the profile of most of the users of MOOCs, they are already graduates and people from Western and Northern Hemisphere countries. So this is, for example, one of the things that has not been reached. No, but the fact is that they provide a social mission. They offer, reasonable learning at a decent cost. And I expect, these micro-credentials will continue to grow in the future. But at the same time, what I guess is that universities are now climbing down a curve of experience, and we will keep improving the experience and also making more sophisticated sorts of tools.
It's been a fascinating discussion and journey that we've had over the last 50 minutes. The time has flown. So I just wanted to finish off with a couple of last questions. I was fascinated by the fact that you mentioned that you're still teaching as a president. How important do you think that is, that the president or the head of an institution such as a university continues to actually do the activities that they are responsible for, whether it's education, might even be research as well, but how important do you think that is?
Well, I think it's quite important, to be very honest. I write my own articles to start with. No, I'm sometimes, particularly by CEOs, I'm asked, who is your shadow writer? And the fact, what I respond, well, this is what I enjoy. I mean, writing and researching and teaching. Teaching keeps me, I hope, keeps me, in the mood and fitted, and connects me with the concerns of the youngsters and different generations. So If I become just an administrator or a CEO, it would be too boring, too boring, and the experience will be, much more narrow. So I very much encourage other deans and presidents and program administrators not to give up teaching nor researching, no, because in order to become a well-rounded academic, you need to do the three things.
I have one final question for you. In the Future University Thought Book series, what we have seen is quite a range of different perspectives, as you can imagine, about the future. What we wanted to do was invite those that contributed, the leaders of higher education, government, business, as well as entrepreneurship. We wanted to challenge them to imagine a future and how the university would exist within it. And as I said, we had quite a range. We had everything from catastrophe for the university to business as usual with some slightly new things. So I wanted to know, from your perspective, where do you land on that spectrum? Where do you think in 10, 20, 30 years time the university will be, and what will it be doing?
That's a very interesting question, and universities have lots of challenges, no? If I may add, a further one, I guess universal access to education is one of, the major concerns that most educators have, no? Since we all realize that education is the key engine in order to transform society. So providing real universal access based on, and I realize that the concept of merit, meritocracy is very much questioned these days. And we probably need, to redefine what is merit. But anyway, universal access to education. But going to your question also, I guess that universities need, to be closer to the real world. And connect. Many are, let's be very honest. And sometimes, universities are the target of unfound and unfair, criticisms, because many of them are very well connected with companies. But probably research as such should be connected with the real problems at companies, at organizations. So what I would foster and favor, is more links and more bridges with the professions, and exposing academics more to the actual problems of the world. I always recall, a sentence from Umberto Eco, the Italian Nobel Prize winner, the writer. Umberto Eco used to say that asking an academic for a remedy, for a solution to any real problem, would be like asking Plato for a remedy to the gastritis, which is not, I don't agree. I mean, Plato provides many remedies, including gastritis, because if you enjoy philosophy and realize that philosophy can give meaning to your life, then, I mean, that's food for your brain and for your mind. But anyway, I actually, disagree with Umberto Eco. I guess that academics cannot just be, at the forefront of demonstrations or just, write articles and pieces in journals. They should get engaged in the actual issues of the real world, no? But anyway, I realize that there's many opinions here. We probably need many different academics, and diversity is also very much welcome here.
Fantastic. Santiago, I've really appreciated the time you've dedicated to our fireside chat today and some of the insights and thoughts that you've shared. I think there's been something for everybody, whether it's been at more of a macro level or looking at some micro examples, more at a theoretical, if you like, or just a broader level about the university down to a very practical level. I think it's been a fascinating, as I said, journey earlier. I think you've provided, from that perspective, I think some really concrete insights that many of the listeners can take forward. So I guess it's my great pleasure to, again, thank you for joining us today. Santiago Iñiguez is the president of UIIN University, and we thank him very much for joining us today. Thank you very much, Santiago.
Thanks very much, Todd. Thanks for having me here. Again, it has been a great pleasure. I really enjoyed our conversation, and the best of luck. Congratulations for your program.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to today's discussion. Stay tuned for the next episode on the Future of Universities podcast series. Follow us on Spotify and LinkedIn, and don't forget to sign up for our podcast newsletter at uiin.org.